the way an American businessman now thinks about China as opposed to the way they thought about China 20, 30 years ago. At that point in China, people were very open, they were very eager, they wanted to get to learn. China today is much more closed. And China has also developed to have a real sense of itself as a world power. And that's very different from the way it was in the past. So while we may hope and would like to see globalization, in fact, I think we're moving in a different direction.
When you're saying China was more open, of course, that was at a time there was very little American investment, Western investment in China.
Right.
Today, there's a massive amount of investment into China.
Absolutely.
There's a massive amount of interdependence.
Absolutely.
Frankly, a lot of the low-hanging fruit has been picked. China's a much more competitive field to be in. Their labor is more expensive.
Right.
Is this really sort of the unwinding of globalization, or is it just a maturation that comes once you've actually already done all of that?
I think it's both, but it's more than that. And the more than that is the fact that I think China has developed a different sense of itself, and the US has become more defensive. Basically, I think we are, I believe, moving from the American century to the Chinese century. And this idea for us in the US to get used to the idea of becoming number two, and by the way, for China, the idea of becoming number one, those are huge transitions.
Now, there are so many ways that I could say I don't necessarily agree with that, in the sense that, number one, militarily, the United States is just overwhelmingly a global power, and China's not remotely close to one. And then secondly, I would focus on all of the internal challenges that China seems to be experiencing economically right now, some of which you've written about because of the middle income trap.
Absolutely.
But also the demographics are so much worse than one would normally expect.
They're not worse than ours, but they're a lot worse than they were before.
A lot worse than they were before. I mean, China's already peaked population at a time that they're very poor. And all of the inefficiencies, the debt challenges that come with that. Why, in the context of all of that, would you feel confident that it's a Chinese century? China more powerful, absolutely. But that Chinese century, the way you framed it implies that literally we're going to go from US number one, China number two, and we're just going to flip them. Do you really think that's happening?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think that as a result of what they have done, much of which has been really something we can admire, I think, there is a momentum. And it's like being on a boat and steering a boat, as I just recently did. Once you're on a certain course, to move in a slightly different direction is very, very difficult. And what I think is happening is that China now has a certain momentum. You were talking about the superiority, which unquestionably the United States still has militarily. But let's not forget that the United States hasn't really won any major conflict in a long, long time. So this military superiority, as applied to being effective in specific places, let's take Taiwan, for example, is not so clear.